The atmospheric processors hummed their eternal song across the Valenth Prime research station as Damien Cross finally surrendered to exhaustion. The human geologist had spent 16 consecutive hours analyzing mineral samples from the crystalline caves that honeycombed the planet's surface. His tent, a standard-issue habitat module, stood at the edge of the main compound where the violet grass swayed in the artificial breeze created by the terraforming shields. He barely managed to kick off his boots before collapsing onto the sleeping platform. The day's work had been extraordinary. The cave systems contained elements that shouldn't exist according to standard planetary formation models. Damien's mind buzzed with theories and calculations even as sleep pulled him under. Within moments, his breathing deepened and his body relaxed completely. What Damien didn't know was that he had an audience. Seraphine had been working in the adjacent laboratory pod when she noticed the human researcher finally retreating to his quarters. The Velarian scientist possessed skin that shifted between pale silver and soft azure depending on her emotional state. Her people had joined the Interspecies Research Initiative only 3 cycles ago, and everything about humans still fascinated her beyond measure. She had not intended to follow him. Professional boundaries existed for good reason between species who were still learning to coexist. But something pulled her forward, a curiosity that transcended mere academic interest. Through the transparent upper panel of his tent, designed to allow stargazing, Seraphine could observe him perfectly. The sight stopped her completely. Damien lay on his back, one arm thrown across his chest, the other dangling off the edge of the platform. His face, so often tense with concentration during waking hours, had softened into something almost childlike. Humans were so different from her people. Where Velarians maintained constant awareness even during rest cycles, humans surrendered completely to unconsciousness. They became vulnerable, defenseless, trusting that the world would not harm them in their absence. Seraphine found herself unable to look away. She studied the rise and fall of his chest, the way his fingers twitched occasionally as if reaching for something in his dreams. His dark hair fell across his forehead in disarray, and she felt an inexplicable urge to brush it back. The humans had taught her people many things, but they had not explained this feeling that made her hearts beat in synchronization for the first time in her life. Time became meaningless as she watched. The twin moons of Valenth Prime tracked across the sky, casting changing patterns of light across his sleeping form. Seraphine's skin flickered through various shades of blue and silver, betraying the storm of emotions she couldn't name. In Velarian culture, witnessing another being in such a vulnerable state created a sacred bond. To see someone without their conscious defenses meant accepting responsibility for their well-being. But did humans understand this? Did they know that by allowing themselves to be seen in sleep, they were offering the deepest form of trust? Seraphine suspected they did not. Humans seemed to treat sleep as merely a biological necessity rather than the profound act of faith it truly was. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Seraphine noticed something remarkable. Damien began to dream more actively. His eyes moved rapidly beneath closed lids, and soft sounds escaped his lips. She leaned closer to the tent wall, her scientific mind cataloging every detail while her emotional centers responded to something far more primal. What did humans dream about? Her people experienced memory consolidation during rest, but nothing like the vivid narrative experiences humans described. She had read the research papers, studied the brain scans, but seeing it happen before her eyes felt different. This was not data on a screen. This was Damien, the man who always smiled when explaining his rock samples, who spoke gently to the analysis equipment as if it could hear him, who once spent an entire evening helping her understand human humor even though she still didn't quite grasp why certain combinations of words were supposed to be funny. The camp began to stir around her. Other researchers emerged from their quarters, preparing for another day of exploration and discovery. Seraphine knew she should leave before anyone noticed her vigil, yet she remained frozen in place. She wanted to understand this feeling that had taken root in her chest. The Velarian language had no word for it, but she had encountered the concept in human literature during her cultural studies. Fascination. Attraction. Perhaps even the early stages of what humans called falling in love. The realization struck her like a solar flare. She, a Velarian scientist who prided herself on logic and reason, had spent the entire night watching a human sleep simply because she could not bear to look away. Damien stirred as the morning light grew stronger. Seraphine panicked, her skin flashing through rapid color changes that would have been embarrassing if anyone from her species could see. She retreated quickly, putting distance between herself and the tent before he could wake fully and discover her presence. In the safety of her own quarters, Seraphine collapsed onto her rest platform. Her three-fingered hands trembled as she processed what had just occurred. She had crossed a line, violated his privacy even if unintentionally. Humans valued their personal space, their boundaries. What would he think if he knew she had watched him through the night like some character from their ancient fairy tales? But beneath the guilt and uncertainty, another feeling pulsed strong and undeniable. She wanted to watch him again. She wanted to understand everything about him, from the way he breathed in sleep to the dreams that moved behind his eyes. She wanted to know if he felt even a fraction of what she was experiencing, this overwhelming need to be near him, to understand him, to perhaps mean something to him beyond just another alien colleague. The research station's morning alarm chimed, calling everyone to the communal breakfast area. Seraphine took several deep breaths, willing her skin to stabilize into neutral silver tones. She would have to face Damien across the breakfast table, pretend that everything was normal, that she hadn't just spent the entire night discovering that the space between their species might not be as vast as everyone assumed. As she prepared to leave her quarters, Seraphine caught her reflection in the polished metal wall panel. Her eyes, large and luminous in the Velarian way, held a new light. Something had changed in those hours of silent observation. She had seen Damien in his most vulnerable state, and instead of finding weakness, she had discovered something beautiful. The question now was what to do with this newfound awareness. Could she continue working beside him, pretending her hearts didn't race when he spoke? Could she maintain professional distance when all she wanted was to close the gap between them? And most terrifying of all, could she risk revealing her feelings when the gulf between their species had never been successfully bridged in romantic terms? Seraphine squared her shoulders and stepped out into the Valenth Prime morning. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She could never look at Damien Cross the same way again. The days following that sleepless night became a careful dance of avoidance and magnetic pull. Seraphine found herself constantly aware of Damien's presence in the research station, as if her body had developed a new sense specifically attuned to him. During team meetings, she positioned herself where she could observe him without being obvious. In the laboratory, she timed her work to coincide with his schedule, creating opportunities for casual interaction while maintaining the facade of professional distance. Damien, for his part, seemed oblivious to her internal turmoil. He greeted her each morning with that easy smile, discussed their findings with enthusiasm, and occasionally sought her opinion on matters relating to Velarian perspectives on planetary formation. He treated her exactly as he always had, which somehow made everything worse. On the fourth day after her midnight vigil, Seraphine made a decision. She would attempt to communicate her feelings using Velarian methods, something subtle that wouldn't violate human customs but might signal her interest. Her people expressed emotions through bioluminescent patterns that flickered across their skin, a visual language more nuanced than words. Perhaps if she allowed herself to respond naturally around Damien, he might begin to understand. The opportunity came during an afternoon expedition to the Crystal Caves. The research team had divided into pairs for safety, and Seraphine found herself partnered with Damien through what she hoped was fate rather than mere coincidence. They descended into the cavern system with their equipment, the walls around them refracting light into countless rainbow fragments. Damien worked with focused intensity, carefully extracting samples and recording measurements. Seraphine assisted him, handing him tools and holding the scanner steady when needed. Each accidental brush of their hands sent waves of warmth through her body, causing her skin to pulse with soft golden light. She tried to suppress the reaction, but Velarian biology didn't allow for such control. After an hour of work, Damien paused and looked at her directly. His brown eyes held curiosity rather than discomfort. "Seraphine, I've been meaning to ask. Your skin has been changing colors more frequently lately. In my reading about Velarian physiology, I learned that indicates emotional states. Is everything all right? Are you uncomfortable with our assignment?" The direct question caught her completely off guard. Humans could be so blunt sometimes, addressing matters that her people would approach with elaborate courtesy. Her skin flashed through several colors before settling into a deep azure that indicated both nervousness and something her people would recognize as affection. "I am not uncomfortable," she managed to say, her translator rendering her words perhaps too formally. "The color changes are indeed emotional responses. Your species notices more than I expected." Damien set down his equipment and gave her his full attention. The cave around them seemed to shrink, becoming intimate despite its vast scale. "I've been paying attention," he admitted. "You're brilliant, Seraphine. Your insights have transformed our understanding of this planet. But lately, you seem different around me. If I've done something to offend you or make you uncomfortable, please tell me." Cross-species cooperation only works with honest communication. Seraphine's hearts pounded so hard she wondered if he could hear them. This was the moment. She could deflect, make excuses, retreat behind professional boundaries. Or she could take the risk that terrified her more than any physical danger. She chose courage. "You have not offended me, Damien Cross. The opposite is true." She paused, searching for words that would translate properly. "In my culture, to observe another being during their rest cycle is to accept a bond with them. It signifies that you recognize their vulnerability and choose to protect rather than exploit it. For nights ago, I watched you sleep. I did not intend to. I could not look away." The confession hung between them like a physical presence. Damien's expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and then something that made Seraphine's skin brighten with hope. He didn't look angry or disturbed. He looked intrigued. "You watched me sleep," he repeated slowly. "For how long?" "The entire night. Until dawn came and the camp awakened." Seraphine forced herself to maintain eye contact, though every instinct screamed at her to flee. "In doing so, I formed an attachment that I cannot undo. My people would understand this. I do not know if yours can." Damien was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then he did something completely unexpected. He laughed, not mockingly but with genuine warmth. "Seraphine, that's possibly the most romantically intense thing anyone has ever said to me. On Earth, watching someone sleep without permission would be considered creepy, but I understand you're coming from a different cultural framework." "Creepy." The translator struggled with the word. "This means disturbing? Unwelcome?" "It can, but I'm not saying that." Damien stepped closer to her, reducing the space between them to mere inches. "I'm saying I wish I'd known. I've been trying to figure out how to approach you for weeks now. You're unlike anyone I've ever met, and I don't just mean because you're Velarian. You're kind, brilliant, and you see the universe in ways that expand my understanding. But every time I considered saying something, I worried about the complications. Different species, different cultures, the whole research ethics situation." Seraphine felt as though gravity had shifted. "You have been considering approaching me? With what purpose?" "With the purpose of maybe getting to know you better outside of work. Sharing meals, talking about things beyond mineralogy and planetary formation. Maybe eventually holding your hand if that's something Velarians do and you were interested." He smiled, and Seraphine's skin erupted in patterns of gold and rose that she couldn't have hidden if she tried. "We do not hold hands in the same manner as humans," she said softly. "But we have our own ways of expressing connection." She reached out slowly, giving him time to withdraw if he wished. When he remained still, accepting, she placed her palm against his. The contact sent bioluminescent pulses racing up her arm, visible beneath her skin like captured lightning. Damien watched with wonder as the light patterns danced. "That's incredible," he breathed. "What does it mean?" "It means you affect me deeply. The patterns show resonance, harmony between us. If you can see them, it means your presence influences my very biology." She kept her hand pressed to his, marveling at the warmth of human skin compared to her naturally cooler temperature. "Does this disturb you?" "Not even slightly." Damien carefully interlaced their fingers, adjusting to her three-fingered anatomy with gentle experimentation until they found a comfortable configuration. "I think this might be the beginning of something remarkable." They stood together in the crystal cave, hands joined, surrounded by refracted light that seemed to celebrate their connection. Seraphine felt fear and excitement warring within her. Interspecies relationships were not forbidden, but they were rare and complicated. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings born from biological and cultural differences, and the scrutiny of their colleagues. But as Damien squeezed her hand gently and smiled at her with such open warmth, Seraphine decided that some complications were worth embracing. She had watched him sleep and could not look away. Now, standing before him in waking connection, she discovered she didn't want to. "Will you tell me about human dreams?" she asked suddenly. "That night, I watched you dreaming and wondered what your mind created in absence of consciousness." Damien's expression softened with understanding. "I'll tell you anything you want to know. And maybe you can teach me about Velarian rest cycles and what it means in your culture that you kept vigil over me. It would take many conversations to explain fully." "Then it's fortunate we have time." He gestured toward the cave exit with his free hand while maintaining their connection with the other. "Should we head back? I suspect we'll face questions if we're gone too long." Seraphine nodded but found herself reluctant to break their physical contact. "Damien, what happens now? Between us?" He considered the question seriously. "We take it slowly. We learn about each other. We figure out how to navigate this together. And we stop pretending we're just colleagues when clearly we're becoming something more." As they made their way back through the crystalline passages, still hand in hand, Seraphine felt a sense of rightness she had never experienced before. She had crossed a boundary that night when she watched him sleeping, but perhaps some boundaries existed to be crossed. Perhaps the space between their worlds was meant to be bridged by those brave enough to try. The research station came into view as they emerged from the caves. Seraphine's skin had settled into a steady pattern of intermingled silver and gold, a color combination that in her culture signified new beginnings and cautious hope. Several team members noticed their joined hands, and she saw curiosity in their expressions, but no judgment. 3 weeks had transformed everything. Damien and Seraphine no longer pretended that their connection was purely professional. They spent their evenings together after research duties concluded, sometimes in comfortable silence as they worked on separate projects, other times in deep conversation that ranged from cosmology to childhood memories. The language barrier that once seemed insurmountable had become less relevant as they developed their own methods of communication that transcended words. Seraphine learned that Damien had grown up near Earth's ocean, that he chose geology because rocks told stories spanning millions of years, and that he had always wondered if he would find something meaningful beyond his home planet. Damien discovered that Seraphine had 3 parents, as was common in Velarian family structures, that she had been terrified during her first space voyage, and that she had volunteered for this mission specifically because she wanted to understand other species at a fundamental level. Tonight, they sat together on the observation platform at the highest point of the research station. Valenth Prime's twin moons hung enormous in the sky, and the stars stretched endlessly above them. Seraphine leaned against Damien's shoulder, something she had been hesitant to do initially until he assured her that humans found such physical closeness comforting. "I have been thinking about that night," Seraphine said quietly. "When I watched you sleeping. I understand now that by human standards, I should have felt guilty for the intrusion. But I cannot regret it. That night changed my entire existence." Damien wrapped his arm around her, careful of the temperature difference between their bodies. They had learned to manage these small incompatibilities. "I don't want you to regret it. If you hadn't watched me sleep, if you hadn't taken that risk of being vulnerable about your feelings, we might have spent this entire mission dancing around each other without ever connecting." "Do you think about the future?" Seraphine asked, the question weighing heavily. "When this mission concludes, we return to our separate worlds. Valeria and Earth are 12 light-years apart." It was the conversation they had both been avoiding, the reality that their time together had an expiration date built into it. The research mission would last another 8 months, and then the team would disband. Damien would return to Earth, Seraphine to Valeria, and the distance between them would become measured in years of light speed travel rather than meters of station corridors. Damien was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried determination she recognized from when he tackled difficult research problems. "I've been thinking about it constantly. The way I see it, we have options. Neither of us is bound to our home planets permanently. The interspecies initiative is expanding. There will be more joint missions, more opportunities for scientists who want to work in diverse teams. You would consider leaving Earth for extended periods. Seraphine's skin brightened with surprise and hope. I would consider leaving Earth permanently if it meant being with you. He turned to face her directly, his human eyes meeting her luminous Velarian ones. Seraphine, I know we've only had 3 weeks together. By human standards, that's barely enough time to be certain of anything. But I am certain. What I feel for you isn't just fascination with someone different. It's you specifically. The way you hum when you're analyzing data. The way your skin shifts to purple when you're amused even though you claim Velarians don't have the same sense of humor as humans. The way you've memorized which foods I prefer in the cafeteria and always make sure they're available when we eat together. Seraphine felt moisture gathering in her eyes, a physiological response she had learned from observing humans. Her people didn't cry, but apparently proximity to humans was teaching her body new tricks. I too am certain. When I watched you sleep that night, I thought I was simply curious about human vulnerability. But it was more than that. Some part of me recognized you, Damien Cross. Recognized that you were meant to matter to me. Then we figure it out, Damien said firmly. Long distance for a while if necessary. Applications for permanent positions on stations like this one. Maybe even. He paused, then continued with a slightly nervous laugh. Maybe even looking into what it takes for different species to build a life together. I know it's complicated. Our biologies are different, our lifespans don't quite match, there are compatibility issues we'd have to navigate. Velarians live approximately 30 years longer than humans, Seraphine acknowledged. This troubles me. To bond with you means accepting that I will likely lose you while I still have decades remaining. And bonding with me means I'll age faster than you, that I'll change in ways you might not be prepared for. Damien took her 3-fingered hand in both of his. But Seraphine, isn't that true of any relationship? Humans bond with each other knowing that circumstances can separate them, that people change, that nothing is guaranteed. The uncertainty doesn't make the connection less valuable. It makes the time we have more precious. Seraphine considered his words, comparing them to Velarian philosophy. Her people approached relationships with careful calculation, weighing compatibility factors and long-term sustainability. Humans seemed to leap first and figure out the landing later. Perhaps there was wisdom in both approaches, or perhaps love required a balance of caution and courage. On Valeria, when two people decide to bond formally, they undergo a ritual called the luminant ceremony, she said slowly. They stand before witnesses as their skin synchronizes patterns, demonstrating biological harmony. It is believed that if two Velarians can achieve perfect synchronization, they are compatible at the deepest level. Do you think we could synchronize? Damien asked. Given that I don't have color-changing skin. Seraphine smiled, an expression she had adopted from him. I do not know. It has never been attempted between species. But perhaps synchronization takes different forms. Perhaps it is found in moments like this, where we understand each other despite every difference. She placed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Steady, strong, reassuring. Then she guided his hand to her chest where her two hearts beat in complementary rhythm. For a moment, they simply existed in that shared space, feeling the life force that animated each of them. Your hearts are beautiful, Damien whispered. The rhythm is like music. Your singular heart beats with enough strength for two, Seraphine replied. It suits you. Humans always give everything with complete intensity. They sat together as the night deepened around them, making plans and promises that defied the logical constraints of their situation. They would apply for the next joint mission together. They would maintain communication across the light years if necessary. They would research what other cross-species couples had done, learn from their successes and failures. They would fight for this connection that had begun with a simple act of watching someone sleep and being unable to look away. As the station's artificial dawn began to lighten the sky, Seraphine felt something shift in her fundamental understanding of the universe. She had come to Valenth Prime seeking knowledge about planets and minerals and the physical laws that governed reality. Instead, she had discovered that the most profound mysteries were not found in geology but in connection. That two beings from worlds 12 light-years apart could find each other and recognize something essential in the meeting. "I need to tell you something," Damien said as they prepared to return to their quarters. "That night you watched me sleep, I was actually awake for part of it. I woke up briefly and saw you at the tent wall. I should have said something, but I was curious about what you were doing. And then I saw the expression on your face, the way your skin was glowing with those patterns, and I realized you were feeling something significant. So I closed my eyes again and let you watch." Seraphine's skin flashed through rapid color changes as she processed this revelation. "You knew? This entire time, you knew?" "I knew you had been there. I didn't know what it meant to you until you told me in the caves." He grinned at her shocked expression. "I figured if you wanted me to know, you would tell me when you were ready. And I was right." She struck his shoulder lightly, a playful gesture she had learned from observing human interactions. "You should have told me immediately. I have been worried that I violated your privacy." "You did, technically, but some violations lead to good things." He caught her hand and kissed her knuckles, another human gesture that still sent pleasant shivers through her. "Besides, I liked being watched by you. It felt like being valued, being seen as worth that kind of attention." They walked back through the waking station hand in hand, no longer concerned with who might observe them or what questions might arise. The future remained uncertain, filled with obstacles and complications that would require patience and creativity to overcome. But uncertainty was simply another word for possibility, and Seraphine had learned from humans that possibility was where hope lived. In her quarters, as she prepared for a rest cycle, Seraphine thought about that night 3 weeks ago. She had stood outside Damien's tent unable to look away, convinced she was witnessing something forbidden. Now she understood she had been witnessing the beginning of her own transformation. Love, she had discovered, was not about perfection or certainty. It was about choosing to bridge impossible distances because the connection mattered more than the obstacles. Her skin settled into a pattern of intermingled colors that had no name in either of their languages. It was the color of two worlds meeting, of differences becoming strengths, of watching someone sleep and discovering your own heart in the process. As consciousness faded, Seraphine's final thought was gratitude for that night, for the courage to confess, and for Damien Cross who had seen her watching and chosen to let himself be seen in return. Some stories ended with certainty. This one ended with hope, which was perhaps the more human conclusion. And Seraphine, who had learned so much from humans, decided that hope was exactly the right note on which to rest.